Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming to another episode of the New Nation podcast. With me, Mike, your host. I want to say thank you for being here. I enjoy that you're here. But listen, before we get into that, let's pay some bills. Let's pay for some medical bills. Go to buymeacoffee.com/newNation. Buy me a coffee. $5 here, $10 here, whatever you want to do. I'm not the police. I can't force you to do anything under the threat of violence. So, buymeacoffee.com/newNation. Let's pay some medical bills. Speaking of the medical bills, what I just came out of was a colonoscopy. I don't know why people are so, kind of so a little scared to talk about colonoscopies. Maybe because it has to do with your butt. Maybe it's this taboo medical subject that a lot of people don't want to talk about. But it is a reality. No pun intended with the whole butt. But it is a reality for those of us as we get older. You 20-year-olds, 25, 30-year-olds, you don't have to worry about that yet unless you're having some issues. I know people with celiac or irritable bowel. Like I know that they probably have a lot of colonoscopies that they have to tend with. I just had an issue that wasn't like life-threatening or anything, but my gastro said that a colonoscopy would be good, just to check some things out and make sure that it isn't anything that we're not thinking it is. But I will tell you, he said that my prep work for the colonoscopy was excellent. I'm not going to go into details about what it entails, but there used to be the old way of doing it where you would have to drink like liters of water, and not liters of water, but liters of this substance which tasted like sand and grape Dimetap or cough syrup, and it was awful to drink. But the way that I did it was we have these magnesium sulfate tabs. You take 12 of them in a 20-minute period, and you chase that with 16 ounces of water. And then after that, you drink 32 ounces of water. Then after that, you wait a couple of hours, and then you do the second dose. You are running to the bathroom, or at least in the bathroom, for 4 hours. And you have a little bit of a break, and then for another 4 hours. It is not fun. You really kind of get rid of all of your food and everything in your belly pretty quickly. And then after that, I'm not going to go into the graphic details, but it's not fun. It's very uncomfortable, but I'm glad I got it done because there was nothing serious that was found, and, they don't recommend me do it for another 10 years. I was just doing an Instagram live, and I mentioned that, my mother had one, but when I asked my dad, hey, Dad, have you ever had one? He said, no. I said, why not? He said, I don't know. They might find something. This is a very boomerish thing to say, that the boomer dad responds to going to the doctor and having things done, which I find funny. But he's 78 and he's never had a colonoscopy, and his only issue has been type 2 diabetes, which isn't gastro related. But they weren't screening for cancer, if that's what you guys were worried about. Not screening for cancer, but on the off chance that in the back of my head I was thinking, oh, I hope they don't find cancer. And who knows? They did a biopsy of something that hopefully is benign. But other than that, they said I have a very good-looking colon. So I was happy to hear that. Moving on. Okay, I don't want to spend too much time because I know I'm going to be stopping and going through a lot of this. And I'm sorry, I can't. GarageBand is one of the worst ways to record a podcast, only because if I'm trying to bring in audio from the computer, like from YouTube or from somewhere else, you have to buy other software that is a pain in the butt to integrate into GarageBand. But GarageBand is good if you just have, one microphone or two microphones. Lately, though, the 2-mic system hasn't been holding up, so I gotta get another field recorder. I sold one a couple months ago. So hey, buymeacoffee.com, hashtag the new nation. It'll help me buy a field recorder. That's really the only thing that I need for this podcast. But what we're going to get directly into is the talk of the town, the trending topic on X, and the bane of every single white alcoholic LGBTQ person on the internet right now is Harrison Butker's commencement address from Benedictine College, which, a preface, Harrison Butker is a very, I don't like saying devout Catholic because I don't like saying I'm a devout Catholic. I don't want to put that label onto anybody else. I would say that he's a very serious Catholic, and he takes his faith very seriously. And I know he attends the TLM, and I know that if he's at an away game, who he plays for the Kansas City Chiefs, which I really don't follow football or care. But if he's at an away game, he will try to have a mass done in his hotel room, which is awesome, right? This is a young dude. I don't think he could be more than 30 years old if not more than 35-year-old. He's a kicker. But let's take a listen to some of the speech, and I'm going to stop it, and I'm going to go through it, and let's go. So if you don't hear me talking for 5 minutes, we're just listening to the speech. Let's go.
Ladies and gentlemen of the class of 2024, I would like to start off by congratulating all of you for successfully making it to this achievement today. I'm sure your high school graduation was not what you had imagined, and most likely neither was your first couple years of college. By making it to this moment through all the adversity thrown your way from COVID, I hope you learned the important lessons that suffering in this life is only temporary.
And that's true, but I want to throw out that, the libs and the leftists and the commies were probably very triggered that he said COVID. He just mentioned it, that COVID was probably a trying time for a lot of people, especially religious people. So, okay, strike number one from the lefties against Harrison, but also life is suffering. It's very, very true. We go through periods of suffering, and it's only by the grace of God that we can come out of those periods of suffering. Let's continue to listen.
As a group, you witnessed firsthand how bad leaders who don't stay in their lane can have a negative impact on society. It is through this lens that I want to take stock of how we got to where we are and where we want to go as citizens and, yes, as Catholics. One last thing before I begin. I want to be sure to thank President Minnis and the board for their invitation to speak. When President Minnis first reached out a couple of months ago, I had originally said no. You see, last year I gave the commencement address at my alma mater, Georgia Tech, and I felt that one graduation speech was more than enough, especially for someone who isn't a professional speaker. But of course, President Minnis used his gift of persuasion and spoke to the many challenges you all faced throughout the COVID fiasco and how you missed out on so many milestones the rest of us older people have taken for granted. While COVID might have played a large role throughout your formative years, it is not unique. Bad policies and poor leadership have negatively impacted major life issues. Things like abortion, IVF, surrogacy, euthanasia, as well as a growing support for degenerate cultural values and media, all stem from the pervasiveness of disorder. Our own nation is led by a man who publicly and proudly proclaims his Catholic faith, but at the same time is delusional enough to make the sign of the cross during a pro-abortion rally.
Based, severely based, okay? And this is what we've been saying for a very long time. Harrison Butker understands this, that Joe Biden is a hypocritical Catholic, and thus I don't think he can even be labeled a Catholic. Joe Biden stands for and supports all of the thing that any, even nominal Catholic should be opposed to, correct? Let's listen.
He has been so vocal in his support for the murder of innocent babies that I'm sure to many people, it appears that you can be both Catholic and pro-choice. He is not alone. From the man behind the COVID lockdowns to the people pushing dangerous gender ideologies onto the youth of America, they all have a glaring thing in common. They are Catholic. This is an important reminder that being Catholic alone doesn't cut it. These are the sorts of things we are told in polite society to not bring up. You know, the difficult and unpleasant things. But if we are going to be men and women for this time in history, we need to stop pretending that the Church of Nice is a winning proposition.
Thank you, Harrison. I've been saying this. If you come to my page looking for a nice account that's going to give you bubblegum and candies and rainbows about Catholicism, you are at the wrong place. I'm not nice. I speak the truth, not my truth, but the truth. I don't go against any Catholic dogma or doctrine, and if I have questions about it, I'll say that and I'll admit it. But I'm not going to go against the church, ever. So I'm not some dude who thinks that we have the right to criticize the church and think that that's a moral obligation of Catholics. No. You don't criticize the church. You can criticize people within the church. You can criticize the Pope if you want, but you also must love the Pope at the same time. You must pray for the Pope at the same time. And this is what I'm saying. It's time for Catholics to stop being nice. It's time for Catholics to stop appeasing the Protestants. It's time for Catholics to stop appeasing the gays. It's time for Catholics to stop appeasing the Marxists. And Harrison Butker hits the nail on the head.
We must always speak and act in charity, but never mistake charity for cowardice. It is safe to say that over the past few years, I've gained quite the reputation for speaking my mind. I never envisioned myself nor wanted to have this sort of a platform, but God has given it to me, so I have no other choice but to embrace it and preach more hard truths about accepting your lane and staying in it.
Boom. Boom. I said this before on my live. I feel like, without sounding narcissistic and full of myself, I feel like that I am filled with the Holy Spirit, or at least directed by the Holy Spirit, to speak in the fashion that I do. When I tell a Protestant, you're lucky that you don't catch a sword, what I'm saying is, I'm quoting St. King Louis IX by saying the only way that you should speak, or one should speak to a blasphemer, is to drive his sword as deep as you possibly can through his bowels. Now, if he's saying it metaphorically, or if he's saying it literally, they both make sense. I'm not advocating for the killing of other people just because we disagree. But this is what I'm talking about. Do not allow people to lie to you just to make a point. If they're lying, call them out on it. If they say Mary isn't the mother of God, call them out on it. I'm sick of it already. Okay, Harrison, let's go.
As members of the church founded by Jesus Christ, it is our duty and ultimately privilege to be authentically and unapologetically Catholic. Don't be mistaken, even within the church, people in polite Catholic circles will try to persuade you to remain silent. There even was an award-winning film called Silence, made by a fellow Catholic, wherein one of the main characters, a Jesuit priest, abandoned the church, and as an apostate, when he died, is seen grasping a crucifix, quiet and unknown to anyone but God. As a friend of Benedictine College, His Excellency Bishop Robert Barron said in his review of the film, it was exactly what the cultural elite want to see in Christianity: private, hidden away, and harmless.
I do agree. I do agree with the ending of that film. Spoiler alert. So if you haven't seen Silence, spoiler alert. It's about these two Jesuit priests who go to Japan in order to evangelize and convert the Japanese people, but also to see if they can find this other Jesuit priest who apostatize. And who's Spider-Man? Andrew Garfield's character is one of the priests sent over with Adam Driver's character, who's another one of the Portuguese priests. He eventually ends up apostatizing because he doesn't want to die, and he feels as though he's saving the lives of people. If he does apostatize, they'll save his life. So at the end of the film, they monitor him after his after he apostatizes from the church and the faith. They monitor him and make sure that he's not doing any sort of prayer, any public mass, any public sacrifice, any evangelization at all. He's monitored for the rest of his life. And at the end of the film, when you see him inside his coffin, he is holding a cross, a crucifix, tightly against his dead body, which means that in his heart, he never left the faith, but outwardly he did. Outwardly, he showed people that he did apostatize. So, that's what's saying, Bishop Barron was saying that, we will quietly display our faith when we should really be martyrs for our faith. And I did like Silence. If you watch Silence, it's a great film, but you'll have that sort of war within yourself. And I think it's awesome that Harrison brought that up. Let's continue listening.
Our Catholic faith has always been countercultural. Our Lord, along with countless followers, were all put to death for their adherence to her teachings. The world around us says that we should keep our beliefs to ourselves whenever they go against the tyranny of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We fear speaking truth because now, unfortunately, truth is in the minority. Congress just passed a bill where stating something as basic as the biblical teaching of who killed Jesus could land you in jail.
And remember, he's not lying about this, nor is he exaggerating this. We talked about this in the last podcast. If you haven't listened to the last podcast, I went in pretty hard. But I read the bill, and then I read about the organization who formalized the language of what is, quote-unquote, anti-Semitism. And they did say that the common blood libel, the Jews killed Christ, they use this in Title IX basically so that if on university campuses you have people who are basically spreading the blood libel or who are talking about the blood libel, they can end up in prison, they can end up arrested, and they can end up charged and prosecuted. So he's not exaggerating or making this up, saying people can be jailed or arrested for this. Let's keep on listening to Harrison. I'm going to try not to, it's a 20-minute video, so I'm going to try not to interrupt as much.
But make no mistake, before we even attempt To fix any of the issues plaguing society, we must first get our own house in order, and it starts with our leaders. The bishops and priests appointed by God as our spiritual fathers must be rightly ordered. There's not enough time today for me to list all the stories of priests and bishops misleading their flocks, but none of us can blame ignorance anymore and just blindly proclaim that that's what Father said. Because sadly, many priests we are looking to for leadership are the same ones who prioritize their hobbies or even photos with their dogs and matching outfits for the parish directory. It's easy for us laymen and women to think that in order for us to be holy, that we must be active in our parish and try to fix it. Yes, we absolutely should be involved in supporting our parishes, but we cannot be the source for our parish priests to lean on to help with their problems. Just as we look at the relationship between a father and his son, so too should we look at the relationship between a priest and his people. It would not be appropriate for me to always be looking to my son for help when it is my job as his father to lead him. St. Jose Maria Escriva states that priests are ordained to serve and should not yield to temptation to imitate lay people, but to be priests through and through. Tragically, so many priests revolve much of their happiness from the adulation they receive from their parishioners. And in searching for this, they let their guard down and become overly familiar. This undue familiarity will prove to be problematic every time because, as my teammate's girlfriend says, familiarity breeds contempt. St. Jose Maria
Was that a Taylor Swift dig? I don't know if it was, but if it was, based.
Continues that some want to see the priest as just another man. That is not so. They want to find in the priest those virtues proper to every Christian and indeed every honorable man: understanding, justice, a life of work, priestly work in this instance, and good manners. It is not prudent as the laity for us to consume ourselves in becoming amateur theologians so that we can decipher this or that theological teaching, unless, of course, you are a theology major. We must be intentional with our focus on our state in life and our own vocation. And for most of us, that's as married men and women. Still, we have so many great resources at our fingertips that it doesn't take long to find traditional and timeless teachings that haven't been ambiguously reworded for our times. Plus, there are still many good and holy priests, and it's up to us to seek them out. The chaos of the world is unfortunately reflected in the chaos in our parishes, and sadly, in our cathedrals too. As we saw during the pandemic, too many bishops were not leaders at all. They were motivated by fear of being sued, fear of being removed, fear of being disliked. They showed by their actions, intentional or unintentional, that the sacraments don't actually matter. Because of this, countless people died alone without access to the sacraments, and it's a tragedy we must never forget.
I'm thinking about this now that I think of it, because my wife's grandmother did die alone during COVID, and she was a church-going woman, and I don't even want to bring that up to my wife, like saying, do you think that your grandma died without receiving the Eucharist, without receiving grand unction? That's horrible to think about, but I mean, thank Harrison for bringing that up.
As Catholics, we can look to so many examples of heroic shepherds who gave their lives for their people and ultimately the church. We cannot buy into the lie that the things we experienced during COVID were appropriate. Over the centuries, there have been great wars, great famines, and yes, even great diseases, all that came with a level of lethality and danger. But in each of those examples, church leaders leaned into their vocations and ensured that their people received the sacraments. Great saints like St. Damien of Malachi, who knew the dangers of his ministry, stayed for 11 years as a spiritual leader to the leper colonies of Hawaii. His heroism is looked at today as something set apart and unique, when ideally, it should not be unique at all. For as a father loves his child, so a shepherd should love his spiritual children too. That goes even more so for our bishops, these men who are present-day apostles. Our bishops once had adoring crowds of people kissing their rings and taking in their every word, but now relegate themselves to a position of inconsequential existence. Now, when a bishop of a diocese or the bishops' conference as a whole puts out an important document on this matter or that, nobody even takes a moment to read it, let alone follow it. No. Today, our shepherds are far more concerned with keeping the doors open to the chancery than they are with saying the difficult stuff out loud. It seems that the only time you hear from your bishops is when it's time for the annual appeal, whereas we need our bishops to be vocal about the teachings of the church, setting aside their own personal comfort and embracing their cross. Our bishops are not politicians, but shepherds. So instead of fitting in the world by going along to get along, they too need to stay in their lane and lead. I say all of this not from a place of anger, as we get the leaders we deserve. But this does make me reflect on staying in my lane and focusing on my own vocation and how I can be a better father and husband and live in the world, but not be of it. Focusing on my vocation while praying and fasting for these men will do more for the church than me complaining about her leaders. Because there seems to be so much confusion coming from our leaders, there needs to be concrete examples for people to look to in places like Benedictine, a little Kansas college built high on a bluff above the Missouri River, are showing the world how an ordered, Christ-centered existence is the recipe for success. You need to look no further than the examples all around this campus, where over the past 20 years, enrollment has doubled. Construction and revitalization are a constant part of life, and people, the students, the faculty and staff, are thriving. This didn't happen by chance. In a deliberate movement to embrace traditional Catholic values, Benedictine has gone from just another liberal arts school with nothing to set it apart to a thriving beacon of light and a reminder to us all that when you embrace tradition, success, worldly and spiritual, will follow. I am certain the reporters at the AP could not have imagined that their attempt to rebuke and embarrass places and people like those here at Benedictine wouldn't be met with anger, but instead met with excitement and pride. Not the deadly sin sort of pride that has an entire month dedicated to it, but the true God-centered pride that is cooperating with the Holy Ghost to glorify Him.
You hear a couple of oohs, the ooh. I guess that's where the LGBTQ alphabet mafia got a little bit upset because he called out what Pride Month is. It's ungodly, and it is a deadly sin. Let's keep going, Harrison.
Reading that article now shared all over the world, we see that in the complete surrender of self and a turning towards Christ, you will find happiness. Right here in a little town in Kansas, we find many inspiring lay people using their talents. President Minnis, Dr. Swafford, and Dr. Zimmerer are a few great examples right here on this very campus that will keep the light of Christ burning bright for generations to come. Being locked in with your vocation and staying in your lane is going to be the surest way for you to find true happiness and peace in this life. It is essential that we focus on our own state in life, whether that be as a layperson, a priest, or religious. Ladies and gentlemen of the class of 2024, you are sitting at the edge of the rest of your lives. Each of you has the potential to leave a legacy that transcends yourselves and this era of human existence. In the small ways, by living out your vocation, you will ensure that God's church continues and the world is enlightened by your example. For the ladies present today, congratulations on an amazing accomplishment. You should be
Here it comes. This is where everybody lost their collective marbles. Okay, and I'm just gonna find anything that he said if it was in the least bit controversial. Let's keep going.
Proud of all that you have achieved to this point in your young lives. I want to speak directly to you briefly because I think it is you, the women, who have had the most diabolical lies told to you. How many of you are sitting here now about to cross this stage and are thinking about all the promotions and titles you are going to get in your career? Some of you may go on to lead successful careers in the world, but I would venture to guess that the majority of you are most excited about your marriage and the children you will bring into this world.
I would venture to guess that a lot of you are more excited about the prospect of marriage and bringing in kids into the world. He's not saying, hey, all you women here, all you women have to be handmaidens and you have to succumb to the wills of your husbands and desires of your husbands and make as many babies as possible. It's not what he said. He said, hey, I'm sure a lot of you will become successful in your career, successful in the business world, which is also disordered, obviously, and he knows that, but he's just, he's acknowledging reality and saying that a lot of women here will go into the business world, will go into the workforce. But I'm venturing to guess that a lot more of you, especially the women who are attending this conservative Catholic college, are more excited about the prospect of having your own family. Right?
I can tell you that my beautiful wife, Isabel, would be the first to say that her life truly started when she began living her vocation as a wife and as a mother. I'm on this stage today and able to be the man I am because I have a wife who leans into her vocation. I'm beyond blessed with the many talents God has given me, but it cannot be overstated that all of my success is made possible because a girl I met in band class back in middle school would convert to the faith, become my wife, and embrace one of the most important titles of all, homemaker.
I am tearing up myself. I hadn't heard this whole speech right there, but I understand what he's talking about. You know what I mean? I love my wife, and not even from the moment I met her, okay? Because it wasn't an unrequited love, you know what I mean? We both grew into this love. But it wasn't until we really got serious about our faith, that we baptized our daughter, that I felt so much more in love with her, because I'm looking at this woman and I'm saying, this is my partner in faith. And you know how I hate the word, like, oh, this is my partner. But truly, this is my partner in faith. I'm leading her in such a way that she has now given her life to Christ and wants our children raised in the same way. You know, and we were watching this documentary about Ashley Madison, which Ashley Madison was a website that allowed married people to cheat on their wives discreetly by joining the website. And it was all people's, a selfish desire to be physical with other people other than their wives, regardless of what problems they were having in their marriage. And I said to my wife, and she said something similar. I said, if we never had sex again, I would still be honored to be your husband. It wouldn't matter. She was saying, yeah, she made a delicious like Pop-Tart shortbread cake for her birthday. And she was saying, yeah, if someone offered me, hey, you can have this shortbread or you can have sex, I would take the shortbread. And we were talking about, how natural family planning still goes against God, even though it's kind of like, the quote unquote natural way one can prepare to have a family, but you're still having sex according to a time of the month, right? So you're saying we can have sex at the beginning of the month just for pleasure, but toward the end of the month, if we want to make a baby, this is the best time to do it. That even she was saying that's against God, that procreation and that sex is necessary for procreation and is reserved only for procreation. And I was just like, yeah, sex isn't really a big deal to me. I love you. I don't love the way I feel while I'm having sex with you. I love you. I love everything about you. I love the woman that you've grown into. I love my wife so much. And I pray that a lot of the people who follow this channel and follow this feed are either with someone or find someone like my wife. You guys do not understand how lucky I am. I punched so far up, and I identify with Harrison right here. Let's keep listening.
She's the primary educator to our children. She's the one who ensures I never let football or my business become a distraction from that of a husband and father. She's the person that knows me best at my core, and it is through our marriage that, Lord willing, we will both attain salvation. I say all of this to you because I have seen it firsthand, how much happier someone can be when they disregard the outside noise and move closer and closer to God's will in their life. Isabel's dream of having a career might not have come true, but if you asked her today if she has any regrets on her decision, she would laugh out loud without hesitation and say, heck no.
And that's Carly. That's my wife. It's someone who was working from home for a corporation that didn't give a shit about her, looking over at a nanny not more than 15 feet away and saying, what is a stranger doing raising my child? That is my vocation. That is what I'm supposed to be doing. And she hasn't looked back, and she hasn't. I mean, there are times like given, like some financial troubles where she's like, maybe I would, maybe I should get a job. And I'm like, no, because the money that you make, you would have to just be paying someone in childcare to, raise the kid while you're away at work. So you net zero. You know what I mean? And I'm just so happy that she's so fervent in wanting to stay at home and raise our children.
As a man who gets a lot of praise and has been given a platform to speak to audiences like this one today, I pray that I always use my voice for God and not for myself. Everything I am saying to you is not from a place of wisdom, but rather a place of experience. I am hopeful that these words will be seen as those from a man not much older than you, who feels it is imperative that this class, this generation, and this time in our society must stop pretending that the things we see around us are normal. Heterodox ideas abound even within Catholic circles. For let's be honest, there is nothing good about playing God with having children, whether that be your ideal number or the perfect time to conceive. No matter how you spin it, there is nothing natural about Catholic birth control. It is only in the past few years that I have grown in courage to speak more boldly and directly, because as I mentioned earlier, I have leaned into my vocation as a husband and father, and as a man. To the gentleman here today, part of what plagues our society is this lie that has been told to you that men are not necessary in the home or in our communities. As men, we set the tone of the culture, and when that is absent, disorder, dysfunction, and chaos set in. This absence of men in the home is what plays a large role in the violence we see all around the nation. Other countries do not have nearly the same absentee father rates as we find here in the US, and a correlation could be made in their drastically lower violence rates as well. Be unapologetic in your masculinity.
Did he just 1355? did Harrison just 1355? I mean, I think that's where he was going, obviously, but he's not saying it, but that's basically what he's doing.
Fighting against the cultural emasculation of men. Do hard things. Never settle for what is easy. You might have a talent that you
Oops, sorry, I accidentally turned it off. My bad.
Don't necessarily enjoy, but if it glorifies God, maybe you should lean into that over something that you might think suits you better. I speak from experience as an introvert who now finds myself as an amateur public speaker and an entrepreneur, something I never thought I'd be when I received my industrial engineering degree. The road ahead is bright. Things are changing, society is shifting, and people young and old are embracing tradition. Not only has it been my vocation that has helped me and those closest to me, but not surprising to many of you, should be my outspoken embrace of the traditional Latin Mass. I've been very vocal in my love and devotion to the TLM and its necessity for our lives. But what I think gets misunderstood is that people who attend the TLM do so out of pride or preference. I can speak to my own experience, but for most people I have come across within these communities, this simply is not true. I do not attend the TLM because I think I am better than others, or for the smells and bells, or even for the love of Latin. I attend the TLM because I believe, just as the God of the Old Testament was pretty particular in how he wanted to be worshiped, the same holds true for us today. It is through the TLM that I encountered order and began to pursue it in my own life. Aside from the TLM itself, too many of our sacred traditions have been relegated to things of the past, when in my parish, things such as Ember Days, days when we fast and pray for vocations and for our priests, are still adhered to. The TLM is so essential that I would challenge each of you to pick a place to move where it is readily available. A lot of people have complaints about the parish or the community, but we should not sacrifice the Mass for community. I prioritize the TLM even if the parish isn't beautiful, the priest isn't great, or the community isn't amazing. I still go to the TLM because I believe the holy sacrifice of the Mass is more important than anything else. I say this knowing full well that when each of you rekindle your knowledge and adherence to many of the church's greatest traditions, you will see how much more colorful and alive your life can and should be. As you move on from this place and enter into the world, know that you will face many challenges. Sadly, I'm sure many of you know of the countless stories of good and active members of this community who, after graduation and moving away from the Benedictine bubble, have ended up moving in with their boyfriend or girlfriend prior to marriage. Some even leave the church and abandon God. It is always heartbreaking to hear these stories, and there's a desire to know what happened and what went wrong. What you must remember is that life is about doing the small things well, setting yourself up for success, and surrounding yourself with people who continually push you to be the best version of you. I say this all the time, that iron sharpens iron. It's a great reminder that those closest to us should be making us better. If you are dating someone who doesn't even share your faith, how do you expect that person to help you become a saint? If your friend group is filled with people who only think about what you're doing next weekend and are not willing to have those difficult conversations, how can they help sharpen you? As you prepare to enter into the workforce, it is extremely important that you actually think about the places you are moving to. Who is the bishop? What kind of parishes are there? Do they offer the TLM and have priests who embrace their priestly vocation? Cost of living must not be the only arbiter of your choices, for a life without God is not a life at all, and the cost of salvation is worth more than any career. I'm excited for the future, and I pray that something I have said will resonate as you move on to the next chapter of your life. Never be afraid to profess the one holy, Catholic, and apostolic church, for this is the church that Jesus Christ established, through which we receive sanctifying grace. I know that my message today had a little less fluff than is expected for these speeches, but I believe that this audience and this venue is the best place to speak openly and honestly about who we are and where we all want to go, which is heaven. I thank God for Benedictine College and for the example it provides to the world. I thank God for men like President Minnis who are doing their part for the kingdom. Come to find out, you can have an authentically Catholic college and a thriving football program. Make no mistake, you are entering into mission territory in a post-God world, but you were made for this. And with God by your side and a constant striving for virtue within your vocation, you too can be a saint. Christ is King to the heights.
Amazing. This man said absolutely nothing wrong, absolutely nothing controversial. And I think we should all listen. It's a 20-minute speech, and if more commencement speeches like this, oh man, how inspiring it would be. And yes, I agree, move to a place that does have reverent masses, that does have a good priest, regardless of what the community is after. He's saying that those things are more important than the cost of living. And I'm thankful that you guys were here to spend a little bit of time talking and thinking about this. You could say a little prayer, Nomine Patris et Filii Spiritus Sancti, et Gloria Patri et Filii Spiritus Sancti, sicut erat in principio et nunc in semper in saecula saeculorum. Amen. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sanctis. Amen. Thank you guys for coming. I really do appreciate you. I love anyone who's listening to this, truly. And we'll see you next week. We're going to have Saint Wave for the 20th episode. Saint Wave and the New Nation. God bless all of you. Have a great weekend.